Good morning, everyone. My name is Ollie Hughes, as Paul has kindly just introduced me. I'm the co-founder of Digital Construction Week, an event we launched in 2015, some time ago. I'm going to be your host for the panel today. Communities, diversity of thought, something I'm quite passionate about myself. Through the event is something we've tried to push quite heavily and change the industry in the face of and what that looks like. So it's a really interesting session panel for me. Thank you, Mark, for the keynote. Incredibly interesting. I'm going to introduce to the speakers shortly, but I just thought I would give some context to diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity of thought, and in particular what we mean when we're talking about it in the context of information management, which is why we're here, I guess, with NIMA and the event that they're running. It's a huge subject. We're going to, in the next 45 minutes to an hour, talk diversity in terms of race, ethnicity, gender, age, sexual orientation, and a huge amount more. So there's only so much we can cover. So we're going to do a bit of a potted version of this, but we're going to try and bring everyone in. I did some work to look at some definitions of diversity and equity and inclusion. We'll probably refer to it as D&I. Hopefully most of you will be familiar with that as an acronym, but for any that aren't. And as I say, in the guise of information management. So I've got a couple of just phrases just to shape that for us. So diversity in information management would refer to the recognition and acceptance of differences in backgrounds, characteristics, and experiences of individuals involved in managing and utilising information. This includes diversity in terms of race, ethnicity, gender, age, sexual orientation, cultural background, educational background, and other demographic and experiential factors. Equity in information management means ensuring that access to representation in the benefits of information and data are fair and just. It involves removing barriers and addressing historical and systematic disparities to ensure that all individuals, regardless of their background, have an equal opportunity to participate, contribute, and benefit from information resources. Inclusion, then, is in information management refers to creating an environment where individuals from diverse backgrounds feel valued, respected, and included. It involves in actively promoting and practicing inclusivity in data collection, analysis, decision-making, and the design of information systems to foster a sense of belonging and engagement for all stakeholders. Now, this is talking about information management more broadly, but you can see how it starts to have an impact on the world that we create, the world that we build, how we code that, the information that we provide around the built environment. But also if we start to think about things like AI and data that we're creating, which will come on a bit too later. For now, though, I'm going to introduce the speakers. I'll allow them to give their own introductions. We've got an amazing lineup of people. Mark, you've just heard from, for most of you that were joined in earlier. But Mark, a quick little intro to you for anyone that missed your keynote. For anyone that has, it will be online and on demand, I believe, after this event. So please do tune in. Mark.
Thanks. I'm Mark McBride-Wright, founder, managing director of Equal Engineers, safety engineer by background.
Thank you. And Bola, and congratulations on a recent honorary doctorate as well. Bola, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me?
We've
awesome.
got you.
So yeah, it's a really good morning. Fabulous keynote, Mark. So I'm Bola Abisogun OBE, the founder and chair of Diversity Surveyors, digital director of BIM Academy, founder and chief excitement officer of the Digital Twin Skills Academy, and I'll elaborate a bit more on that as soon as we get into the panel conversation. But very, very happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
Amazing. And then Jenny, we'll pass to you, Jenny Barrett. We've got two Jenny, so we're going to go Jenny and Jen. But Jenny, I'll let you introduce yourself, please.
Hi, thanks. I'm Jenny Barrett. I'm a principal lecturer in the School of Business at the University of Central Lancashire. And I'm also a member of the executive team at Women in BIM and their global education lead. So my work there, stems primarily from a lot of research that I've done in the area of sort of business psychology and how diversity happens in collaborative teams, particularly in digital spaces.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And Jen Revell, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks, Ollie. I'm Jenny Revel, but Jen for today. I work at the British Antarctic Survey as the risk and assurance manager there. I have a background in humanitarian sector. where I focus a lot on psychological safety and managing teams at Reach in high hazard environments. So now that I work at the Antarctic Survey, that managing construction teams at Reach is really important for us, which is why I'm interested in being part of the panel today. So thank you for having me.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Michelle Lee.
Thanks, Oliver. So hi, good morning, everybody. So I'm up in Preston as well, Jenny. I'm an alumni of UCLan. I've got my third year of my MBA next year, starting in March, having done the first couple of years whilst working over the past 7 years. Yeah, construction. I've been in construction since 2007, 2008, and I've always loved the industry. There was just a fire in my belly about it. So Mark's keynote really resonated with me. I joined a company called Procore Technologies back in April this year, and previously I've spent time on house builds, social housing schemes. So I've been in and out on a sales and marketing perspective construction for some years. And I've mentioned it to you, Oliver, for the Get Construction Talking, that I wanted to pick up from what Mark was saying. One of the first partnerships we went live with at Procore was with the B1N team, Fred Mills, to Get Construction Talking. And that is basically it. Why don't we talk? You know, from being on site, I've had some of the biggest belly laughs on construction sites with the most amazing people. So when I heard the death by suicide statistics, and it's 2 people a day, by the way, die by suicide in the UK construction sector. I think the figures are the same in APAC and America as well. It really resonated with me, like why is that? And the clear link is the lack of diversity. There's got to be something in that. So yeah, I was really pleased when I got asked to be part of this panel today and talk to you all about it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's a really pressing topic, a really important topic, and there's a lot that it encapsulates. What we'll do with the speakers today is try and provide not just the sort of hearts and mind bits, and Mark will come to this, but I suppose the business imperatives. You know, that suicide rate is pretty shocking, I would suggest. You know, so that's as one element. But the business imperatives of you know, ultimately we build the built environment for people, right? Like for communities, for people to live in, to work in, to benefit from, to raise children in, to grow old in. You know, that's kind of why we're all here, and the importance of diversity can't be overstated enough, I don't think. So we're obviously going to talk hearts and minds elements, and you know, a lot of people are going to be on this webinar because they're converted, right? Because they believe in doing the right thing, and they believe in the importance of it. But also for each of the speakers, we're going to talk a bit about some kind of the business aspects of, you know, if we're not just doing hearts and minds, okay, well, why are we doing this, and why should we be doing this? And hopefully also offering some practical examples that you as the audience can maybe take into your own organisations and businesses and learn from as well. So we're going to keep fairly focused to say we're not going to solve the entirety of the D&I challenge, but certainly in our piece of the industry, we're going to have a good discussion, all being well. There will be the ability to ask questions, and we'll probably save them towards the end, provided we've got a bit of time. So please do add them to the chat if you're sat in the audience and you have anything for our panelists. First question, though, and Mark, I'm going to steer this towards you, is on that hearts and mind piece. You referred to it on one of our calls earlier, and I believe in the keynote, that it's hearts, minds, and gut as well. But on that business imperatives, can we talk a bit about the opportunities linked to D&I, and what are the opportunities that more diverse, equitable, and inclusive environments offer a business in the built environment? If I can hand to you first on that one.
Sure. So I think a couple things. From a skills perspective, having a wider array of people to pull from helps with a big gap that we've got coming at us down the pipeline. So we need more people, full stop, to even do anything and build anything or design anything to be built. And then by pursuing that diversity, by aggressively pursuing a diverse composition of people, we will have better things. You know, we will have people that will think more broadly, challenge more broadly as well, if they don't see stuff that relates to who they are or the context within which they've grown up reflected in the design process. And where I think we've moved as a sector is we have we've started putting in place diversity, equity and inclusion considerations within processes and procedures, but how we now translate that through to culture, is important. And I think if we had more diversity in design teams, if the world had more diversity, if we'd had more diversity with people who needed additional accessibility requirements to navigate a city, we wouldn't live in the world that we live in now. Cities would look very different. We're very reactive in a lot of the additive layers that we put into design. And again, it's the answer for all of this is within safety. You try and minimize additive layers of safety because it introduces areas where those control measures can go wrong. You want to try and implicitly and inherently have processes, designs that are safe from the get-go. So the same needs to apply to our approach to talent management, talent acquisition, talent retention. By pursuing diverse teams, we'll have more people that can help shape design. So that might be those that have grown up living in social housing. They can actually speak from a point of reference of authenticity when they're, get their chartered surveying degree and join an engineering contractor to help with design and stuff. They've actually lived it. They've not grown up in a privileged middle class environment and grown up in a family that's had been mortgage free and never had to live in social housing. It just it's common sense having people who've lived in these contexts being in our design team. So that's one area, risk mitigation and having a comprehensive focus on safety.
Fantastic. And any other speakers care to offer anything on that, or particularly thinking, business imperatives, opportunities?
I'll go on then. Go on, ladies before gents. Go on.
Okay.
Go on, Jen.
Yeah, just to add to what Mark's saying there, I think ultimately construction and design is about creative processes and finding good solutions. That's ultimately what we do. And when we do that, we bring our own mental models and perspectives to the problem that we're dealing with. So if we're excluding some of those, then the array of potential solutions that we're likely to find is going to be limited. And just from a business competitiveness point of view, organisations, by not being diverse, are therefore limiting their competitiveness in the market. And I think at the moment, whilst the industry is going through such evolution and transformation, the key word here is adaptability. And if you've got a culture where everyone can express their ideas and be who they are, then you are creating and embedding an adaptability within your business. Without doing that, then you will struggle as the market shifts and the market transforms. You will struggle to adapt to that as a business.
Completely agree. Bola?
Hi guys. Yeah, so we run the risk of salivating over what Mark has said, and we will not be able to contain, in my case, the excitement for half an hour. 45 minutes is not going to do this conversation any justice. I just put it out there. I was going to jump all over what Mark said and what Jen has actually still quite conveniently, but the business case and the imperative, it's very simple. This particular conversation is being fed into procurement, and actually you can win more business. So that whole lived experience piece that has to be translated and monitored, evidence, etc., in your bid via the team is so much more important now. And that tangibility, that real life perspective, that ability to engage, particularly with those communities we're seeking to get through to, is a direct product of a diverse team. So I fully agree with what Mark said, and Jen's just anointed it. And I'm going to shut up now because we've got a big round table.
I think we'll pass to Jen as well in a minute. I think it's really important because, we're in an industry that doesn't deal in huge profit margins. We're in an industry that is affected by the economics, of where we're at as a country and what's going on, of everything else. And so this topic that I think could often be considered as the softer side, the less imperative, right? Like, let's go out and win work. That's what we need to focus on. Let's not worry about the nice piece of keeping everyone happy and taking everyone's opinions. It's hard, and especially if you think a lot of our industry is SME, right? It's not big corporate organizations with huge policy teams, HR teams, and everything else. So that really getting into the nub of, okay, well, actually, this is a way of evening work. That's what we kind of want to get to and express. Jen, you had some comments to make on the question as well.
Picking up from what Mark was saying and what Jenny was saying, and about hearing different voices. If you are that lone voice, it's very, very hard to make yourself heard or to feel that you have your space. And so I know we're going to touch on this later, but it's very much about providing that safe environment. And particularly for us, when we're working south in the Antarctic, it's a constantly shifting environment, as it is on many construction sites. And knowing that you feel supported by your colleagues enables you to speak up earlier when you see something that's not working. So actually your agile risk management is so much stronger if you feel safe and supported and able to speak up, rather than going away and taking that home with you and worrying about what you do with it and where you take it. So that's why I think there is that imperative to create that very safe space for everybody, so that people speak up earlier about the risks that they're seeing on a daily basis.
So go on, Michelle.
I can't remember what I attended recently. It was a workshop, but there was something that really resonated with me, and I've done this in the past. That they were saying, by not saying anything or not calling it out, you are saying something. You're saying it's okay. And I thought, wow, because a lot of the times I think people feel that fear and don't want to be the one, that stands up, and it isn't out of a belief mechanism that they don't recognise what's saying is wrong, but it might be a fear mechanism. And I thought, wow, by not saying something, you are saying something, and you're saying what's going on is okay, when really it's not.
100%.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
I guess as well, there's a productivity piece here, right? Productivity in the UK more generally, but also as an industry, it's not the highest. And actually, if you think about mental health example, you think about not hearing other people's views, opinions, thoughts, it's a real challenge as far as how we excel and achieve what we want to be achieving, right?
Yeah.
I'll move on to the next question, which is going to dig a bit deeper into thinking about information management. I'm going to open up to the panel, so please do shout and chip in on this one. And I suppose the question is, in what ways can a lack of diversity and inclusion in the built environment lead to data biases and information disparities? And what steps can be taken to mitigate these challenges? So this is thinking about what we've just talked about, but really through the lens of information management, data. And particularly, we mentioned this on a call before, thinking about advancements in things like AI, in terms of, well, where's that sourcing its data from? Again, to quote his other comment, I think there's quite a few webinars within this debate that we could steer into. But has anyone got any thoughts on that? So it's a lack of D&I basically leading to data biases and information disparities, and what can we do to mitigate that? Anyone want to jump in on that?
Go ahead. I'm going to do this all afternoon. Sorry. Please. He says.
And it was an EDI piece actually with the CIOB over at Liverpool a couple of months ago. And when I was listening, I was thinking about it's not AI, so to speak, but it's more like how can tech help? And I was thinking about, and it's back to the calling out behaviour. So if someone doesn't, and maybe it's a process thing as well, I don't know. If someone doesn't feel comfortable to call out unwanted behaviour personally, or they've seen it and they don't feel comfortable, how else do we address it? And at the moment in business, you either have to call it out, you say nothing, or you have to report it. And I feel like that's taking it from one extreme to another. Because if you're reporting it, you're going to HR, and you might not want someone to lose the job or be given a warning about it. You just might want to make them aware, but not have the confidence to bring it up to them. Then it got me thinking about how can tech help with that. So is there a way that we can, on a construction management platform such as Procore, have a facility where people can log unwanted comments or unwanted behaviour, and someone within that company collates all these words and terms that are being used, and at the end of the month, they look at the data, look at the insight, and go, do you know what? We need to do a quick workshop on menopause or gender equality, or so can we do it from an education perspective rather than a stick perspective? Because as I say, at the moment, there just doesn't seem to be. You either call it out, which is quite confrontational, you say nothing, or you report it. I was like, is there something in between that we can help the industry, educate the industry, or people really? Not even, it's not construction specific, I don't say, but you know what I mean?
I think that would be like being dynamic in your hazard observation cards and trending the results that come through that. One of our bits, there's a thing bit similar to what you're suggesting, we worked with a university that did look at its data dynamically for what was being reported to its, if you're in trouble helpline type thing. And they found that through students, there was an increasing rate of bullying and harassment, victimization towards female students amongst the new students that had come in. So what they did was they then ran a campaign in the student union around, this isn't tolerated, what to do if you're affected by this. And it then, some positive outcomes came out of it. Some people then actually stepped forward to, vocalize what had happened. And so it's about building trust in the system and looking at the data of seeing things happen. So I thought it was just a really interesting example of reacting to data in more or less real time to then do marketing campaigns locally to then try and alleviate a problem that was showing up.
Positively, yeah, that's a really positive approach.
Exactly.
Boli, you had some comments to add?
Just a quick one, really. You asked the question, how do we avoid data biases and information disparities? So just picking up on the AI piece, it's almost garbage in, garbage out. Garbage in based on a very exclusive perspective, not very diverse. And then the garbage out being the artificial intelligent perspective of the persons that wrote the code or the piece, but not willing to engage a wider conversation around actually, is all this the good stuff? Is it all the right stuff? And is it framed in the right way? And is there context? And is there all these other things that need to inform an AI process, right? So that data bias piece is a critical red flag, always has been for me. And in a safety context, Mark, I can't imagine the kind of things you need to consider in that space. But that was just quick tuppence on the data bias piece.
Amazing, thank you. Anyone else to jump in? Absolutely.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, I think the garbage in, garbage out kind of summarizes it really, but I think it's about the culture that surrounds that data as well, because that's about how we perceive the data. And if buildings, infrastructure are going to be produced by diverse teams, then they're going to be representative and safe for the communities that will ultimately use and occupy them. And I think it's about creating a culture, diverse culture around data management, so that the way we obtain data, but also the way we interpret data, is done from a variety of perspectives that are representative of our communities that we're building for at the end of the day. And I think I kind of have to raise the sort of dangerous topic of positive discrimination in that. In that we have a responsibility to build diverse teams, and whilst positive discrimination is now quite a negatively loaded term, I think it justifies a need to rebrand what positive discrimination is and re-understand it as actually just designing teams that are representative of our societies, and making sure that we acknowledge that responsibility.
And I think at times, obviously across the industry, there is difficulty in recruitment. There are recruitment freezes across lots of areas of industry. You might have an aspiration to build a diverse team, but be limited in what you can actually do and build around your team. So then if you can't build that team, it's incumbent on you as a leader to think about your own privilege and power and positionality to make sure that when you review data, you don't see it from your own privileged perspective, that you don't look at something and dismiss it because that's not your lived experience, and that you take, as Mark was saying in his keynote speech, that it's incumbent on you to learn about those things, that if you can't build a team around you, you at least are trying to understand the perspectives of people who might see the data in a different way or interpret it in a different way.
It was a really, really interesting thought, that, because again, large organizations, there's a good capacity, right, for recruitment. There's work, there's money, there's revenue, there's the ability to do that. But again, when we think about smaller organizations, you might just have 10 people in a company, right? So how representative of society can they be with that smaller number? So really interesting thought, that idea of perspective, right? And that's what we're kind of talking about, is how would someone else with a different lived experience view what we're talking about here? thinking practically, and I'm going off script here a little bit, but what can people do? What would be the guidance? Saying a leader, well, you've got to think about it from someone else's view. Like, what would your advice be? Like, where do they go to get that perspective if that's not something that's their lived perspective?
Network. They can
Yeah.
network.
I think there are different levels of culture, aren't there? In that there's your team culture in the office. There's the project team culture, which is bigger. There's your disciplinary culture, and there's the sector culture, the industry culture. And I think it's about developing that representation across all those tiers.
Agreed. I talk about networking because actually, setting up diversity surveyors in 2005 was my unapologetic attempt to gate crash the conversation, right? Nobody was talking about black surveyors back in 2004. Well, actually, back in 94 to 99. And I was inspired in 2005, having qualified in 99 and literally not really seeing many like me in senior positions. And that was the reason for setting up diversity surveyors in 2005. But, you talk about an ability to speak to, and how does a very small business, in many cases a micro business, how do they increase their cultural competency, as I call it? Well, networking is probably the only and probably the most cost-effective way to do that. Tons of networks out there. We've got several represented on this call today. So that networking piece, that willingness to not be complicit by being silent, and to open up, treading those eggshells, and get into those conversations and make mistakes, right? And actually, that's how you learn. So we've got to be a bit more less egoistic and more humble, and enter those conversations willingly, on the basis that you get it right, you can win more business. It's not rocket science, really.
So one of the things that that we've recently started over the last year or so at the British Antarctic Survey is these sort of privileged conversations. So they're lunchtime sessions. People are invited to come and talk. They can choose how they want to present. But it is about recognizing that within the Antarctic Survey, particularly the scientists, come with a certain level of academic experience, that potentially Cambridge is a very expensive place to live. There might be elements of financial privilege, and some of those areas of privilege are quite hidden because you're in a community where people are similar to you. And so opening up that privileged conversation, I think, has really surprised people when they started to unpick some of those things, and it's pushed them to network more widely and think about their own position and their own power that they hold.
Nice.
What do you guys think about? I think we're just talking and opening up and being vulnerable, and all these are quite soft skills. Yeah, or in an industry that you train in hard skills. If you're laying bricks, or that's a lot of hard skill training to build a building. And I feel like we've neglected the soft skill side of things. But can soft skills be taught? Should we be teaching it? Are we nature nurture with hard and soft skills? How does that feed in?
Wow. So that's the elephant. That's the elephant in the room, right? And I'm not sure whether you can teach soft skills, but what you can do is you can expose people to what they look like. And that learning, that whole, well, why did you do that question? And that answer that's informed from a cultural perspective or whatever,
Yeah.
begins to develop that softer side. And that, we don't have empathy. I talk about the construction sector and built environment being a sector that has no moral compass. And that to me was reflected in the Grenfell Tower tragedy. But empathy and understanding and humility, those soft skills are what needs to be shown, not necessarily taught. And then that whole intergenerational piece will allow the teaching to take place over time through conversation largely, and making mistakes. And that's my view.
So we've got a question come in that I said I'd save them to the end, but it probably talks to this point. Some of which, I'll read the whole question, some of which we are going to cover in a couple of the questions as we come down the list around creating environments, around some of the community projects, around engagement with education. There's a bit at the end that I think feeds into this a little bit that probably adds to the point. So the question was on the point about cognitive diversity and safe spaces to allow people to speak. How do we do that actually? Which I think is really what we're talking about. It says many of us are trying to find our tribe. Some people come from backgrounds where they already feel like they shouldn't be here. How can more senior people encourage and create that sense of safety that allows the potential for disruption, changing the status quo? And that question was from Shax Akinwale. So the bit that I want to might be a known person there, might be a recognition there, but I think
I'm not
from the
going to
last
answer it. Shaq's great. Yeah, that's loaded. That's a loaded gun.
loaded
Shaq's, that's not for
question.
me.
Thanks very much. Well, we'll screen some of them, but listen, listen, I think it's probably it's a really good question. I think
I would
particularly.
just jump in, Ollie.
Mm,
I would just the first thing that you need to be absolutely clear on, which people often don't get right, is pursuing inclusive cultures is not about now trying to make everyone have the same opinion as you or make everyone become agreeable. It's
Mm,
about getting comfortable that recognizing that innovation happens when people can say what they think. It doesn't give you license to say what you think if it is going to negatively impact me, but we need to realize that there are some interfaces in DEI where there is a potential conflict. There is conflict management that needs to happen. It's how you, as a leader, help orchestrate that and then channel that energy positively. People often conflate DEI about making it everyone now has to change their viewpoint or change their opinion. It's about allowing difference to coexist, because it's that difference coexisting and being able to speak freely that allows it to then be channeled. And we've got a big issue right now with universities and free speech, and where does that sit alongside advocating for different groups, etc. So there's tension points that come up in
mm.
particular communities, and you just need to be aware that that's your role as a leader to shape that.
This is where I think if being a bit abstract here, but taking it back even further. So, what about creating spaces for people to feel comfortable to share? Yeah, the built environment can do that. If we start including, and even on a construction site, I'm not talking. You've got two phases of the construction site: the build and when it's built, haven't you? But when it's built, we include social spaces part of social value to encourage relaxation, green spaces. If we could include small green spaces on site for people to go and sit in and just relax and take the load off, maybe that'll encourage the talking, the openness of vulnerability, rather than being surrounded by construction sites are hard and fast. They're moving. There's budgets. There's time. It's a really difficult environment to be in. So by creating possibly a little green space, which would need to be designed right at the start and included at the start, that might even open up another culture that we don't have at the moment, which is it's all right to stop and it's all right to sit and it's all right to talk. And apparently there is research out there that green spaces do promote mental health. So being in nature, it does aids mental health. So there could be a link or an opportunity there to do something a bit different.
Ollie, can I just come in on that very quickly? Such a great point made
absolutely.
with such eloquence on the back of Mark. I think as a QS, I'm sitting contractor side. Where does that sit in the prelims? Is a typical question, right? How do we afford that? So if we can't link financially green space, mental health and well-being to the project budget or contingency, given that we're in the minus already because we bought the job,
Yeah.
where does it sit, right? That's the work we have to do.
And this is the top down that I think we need at the moment. Everything seems to be bottom up. And if it was mandated in health and safety accreditation, mental health, what are you doing, practically doing? Not you've got an employee helpline, and if you need help, you just phone. Some people, it's more than that for a lot of people.
Right.
So I think if we had a good top down, bottom up approach, we'd probably get there a bit quicker.
And I think
Sorry.
just to add to that, then idea of green space kind of links into a point about how we do collaborative group work, inclusive work. We're still working to methods and traditions of interacting that were kind of set in the 1940s. The traditional project team meeting with the chair and the specialist representatives and the kind of the agenda. Our workspace, we've moved online. We've got how we interact, how particularly those of the younger generation interact, is totally different now. So to enable people's voices, we can't kind of keep hitting it with the same stick and expecting change. I think starting to rethink about how we hear voices, what communication actually is, and enabling, do we need get rid of the agenda? The traditional meetings, particularly when in a face-to-face environment, are usually incredibly hierarchical, and you know, younger or junior members don't feel able to speak. And sort of the research is kind of those are the kind of comments that I've heard about the influence of hierarchy. And I think we need to kind of deconstruct that a little bit and say, that might have been fit for how we worked then, but it's not fit for how we work now. And we need to get rid of some of the vestiges of the old ways of managing our work and doing work, and looking at different ways of interaction, using online spaces, using green spaces, that is more fit for communication as it is now.
And the irony is it fits into the sustainability things as well. We want more green spaces, we want more biodiversity. Like it's a win-win situation.
So I'm gonna change your order up a bit. So Jen, I'm going to pass to you in around creating environments, because I know there's quite a bit around safeguarding, creating environments, the right environments as well. So I'm going to pass to you, and then there's a bit of debate and a discussion bit to be had, I think, around this switch to this more mobile working. I feel like construction is kind of inherently mobile, between site, between office, between anything else. But obviously the COVID word and how that's changed our work patterns, technology, and how that comes in and has enabled it. So we'll feed into that. But first, Jen, I wanted to go to you and look for some practical examples in your work in terms of creating environments within businesses or within our teams that allow diversity, equity, and inclusion to thrive, but allow us to bring in this different diversity of thought. If you could speak a bit about that, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, great, thanks. And actually, it's something, Michelle, when you're talking about creating these sort of green spaces, we don't have the luxury of being able to do that in the Antarctic. There's not much green there.
Blue space, blue space.
But it does really matter to us what the environment is like there. Conversely, we have the luxury of really extensive pre-deployment training, which is very, very important for us. Before we can send a team who are going to be living and working together for 6 months, who will have very little breakout space away from each other, you have to be confident that they know how to talk to one another in a respectful way, that they know how they're going to resolve any conflict, personal conflict or work conflict that might arise. And so the pre-deployment training that we run focuses hugely on people's psychological safety. We have a big Safety Together campaign, which looks at both physical safety, mental health, and your own social well-being. We bring in lots and lots of externals to work with us on things like your physical health, whether that's 5 minutes of resistance band training, but also your mental health, so that you're sending people who are as resilient as possible to something which is potentially a very, very difficult working environment. So as well as supporting people up front, we also make sure that when we're recruiting, we have really inclusive recruitment practices. Most of the people who are recruiters go through sort of an inclusive recruitment training to make sure that we're pulling out the way that we can best offer the experience of being recruited into BAS, and that we're not inadvertently putting off people who feel, as you were saying earlier, that maybe they don't belong in a certain space. And also bringing a huge mix of skill sets, whether it's your site supervisor down to your plumber. Actually, it doesn't matter. Once you're south and you're working, you're respected for who you are and what you're doing. It becomes a much, much flatter hierarchy, and you lose some of the things that Jenny was talking about people feeling scared, because you've already had them all in that shared space. They've already been a bit vulnerable in front of each other. We've talked about what our expectations look like. And we also would bring people home. If we didn't feel that their behaviours were right, we would extract them and pull them out, because it's too damaging for the rest of the team. So there's that really strong steer from the top that there are certain behaviours that we won't tolerate. And I think that makes people feel much, much safer working in that environment.
Excellent.
It's a really interesting play. I mean, obviously, the Antarctic probably quite an extreme, in terms of environment.
Of course.
But nothing that you're talking about there feels like it'd be out of place in a construction site in Birmingham.
No, it shouldn't be.
Right. So then, Michelle, you mentioned around kind of mandate and where do we position this in terms of priorities. because nothing you're saying there couldn't be applied to a construction site. We're saying that, and it's the fact of the matter is there's 2 people die from suicide every day within our industry, right? I'd say it's a pretty extreme environment, whatever way you look at it, if that's the outcome. So a bit about talking about how you might create that in others. Any comments around how you would create that kind of environment elsewhere? I'm going to move through as well with sort of time-wise, but we might move on to a bit more around the mobile working, just thinking around time. Sorry for everyone. I know this is, as we pointed out at the top of the call, this is probably a much longer conversation. So we'll take any questions. We'll get feedback as well through Nima to everyone. So thinking about that shift into mobile working as well and how that sort of deploys. And then there was a follow-up to Shax's sort of second part to the question, which I think is really poignant as well, which is how we engage all these different diverse parties without excluding majorities. Now, Mark, I know you spoke quite a bit to that within your keynote as well. But what impact do you feel this sort of mobile working, this shift has in terms of well-being, safeguarding, diversity of thought? Jenny, I know you've sort of done some work around this as well. If we could talk to that for a little bit, that'd be great.
Is that this Jenny?
Yes, sorry. Yes.
Yeah, I think the mobile working and hybrid working, I think, is something we're still all getting used to. And, senior colleagues are still figuring out how that has to happen in organisations. I think the hybrid working or mobile working has been an absolute blessing for many, and particularly women who have now got a bit more flexibility in being able to kind of school run, or because it usually does fall to women predominantly. So the flexibility for many has been really welcome and has actually given them the bandwidth, the brain space to be able to manage work and caring responsibilities. However, as we all know and has come through in this conversation, there's no one size fits all when it comes to supporting colleagues, supporting mental health and supporting diversity. So whilst it's brought benefits in one area, there are grave concerns in other areas where, in terms of how we check in on our colleagues and how we check in that everyone's okay. Because if somebody's working at home a lot, we don't know if it's because they want to or they don't feel able to come in. There's also a business imperative there in terms of when people are more distributed, they're less able to feel part of something in terms of your organisation. Now, whether that's feeling part of a brand that they can then go out and sell and perpetuate. So there's a kind of business kind of issue there, but also in terms of that's, what belonging is and how we do belonging at a distance. That's a real challenge for us. And we need to really kind of focus on ways that we allow our teams to be cohesive and for everyone to belong when they're working in a geographically distributed way.
Really interesting. There's a couple of points just in our chat as well around that sort of mix of work types in our industry. You have a predominantly office-based, computer-based, you've got a lot of site people, and that sort of, talk mental health, there's a kind of loneliness element to that. There's a lack of sort of, connection, which some of the technology things can obviously help, but there's still a personal element of that. I'm going to bring in, we're running on time. I'm hoping that our audience will forgive us if we eat a couple of minutes into lunch and run over slightly. I don't think we can condense this too much more. Well, I wanted to come to you because what we're talking about a lot here is people within this, okay? And actually what we want to bring is people into the built environment, into construction, architecture, engineering. And I want to get from you, I know you've done a huge amount of work in this area around some of the initiatives and projects that have used data information management to drive positivity and change in communities, particularly in terms of promoting diversity, equity, inclusion. If I can pass to you to talk a bit about the work that you've done in that space, particularly around digital twin skills and in that area.
Thanks, Ollie. And I run the risk of probably saying things that have been so eloquently described and offered earlier, because this is just such an amazing panel. So I'm going to go straight into the core of what I've been doing, and largely whether we're talking about 2010-11 when I chaired the Equality Human Rights Commission's inquiry into race discrimination in construction. We came up with an action plan 12 years ago. You could reprint the action plan today. Nothing's moved, nothing's changed. But for me, I am trying to get, and have been unashamedly trying to get more black and brown into our sector. And I'm not going to apologize for it, because actually the point that Jenny made about trying to maybe rebrand positive discrimination kind of speaks to me very loudly there. But I saw the Grenfell Tower tragedy, and specifically the Building Safety Act that came out of it, as a real Trojan horse for change, cultural change, operational change, change management, etc. And obviously trying to comply with the requirements of the golden thread. My suggestion is we use digital twins, or at least models to shadows to twins, as a journey. And within that space, because we're largely talking about urban inner city areas, particularly across London, young people. And within that space, black and brown young people. And there's a real opportunity, I still believe, for public sector asset owners to use Section 106 tools to better enforce requirements through procurement that supply chains have to buy into, and evidence. And that evidence piece really is where the Digital Twin Skills Academy comes into play. We want to be that bridge between supply chains and clients instructing work. This is where BIM Academy brings its whole body of work into play too, as an information manager. But that people piece, how do we measure it? How do we track social value? How do we ensure, measure, monitor whether that whole diversity piece is kicking in? And through my lens, that's largely on a race-based approach. And I think we're failing. I think if you listen to Dame Hackett, the industry is struggling with implementation of the Building Safety Act in its widest context. And therefore, the conversation around people, change, race, young people, that intergenerational piece, that cognitive piece, that all the strands of diversity are failing to be addressed and built into what could be a Trojan horse for change, i.e. the Building Safety Act. So I'm already saying that there's a generation of change we are embarking upon, but that's 30 years, right? And the low-hanging fruit I'm seeing right now could exist within asset owners, commissioning teams that bring diversity in their team and diversity in their value chains all the way through supply chains. And that is the space I've been in for a while. But the Digital Twin Skills Academy is about bringing in that gaming engine, bringing in that fun factor, working with 16 to 25-year young individuals who want to get in, but really have no point of access. So that's just an example of the kind of work I'm doing now, but it's based on the last 25 years of pushing in that direction for more ethnicity at senior and mid-management level, and failing miserably. I'll be honest, it's been a tough ask. I think it's maybe even tougher now, but it's a challenge that I'm willing to continue to keep pushing it.
Well, it's a sobering point. one towards the end. I think it's a real opportunity, right, for industry, especially when you think about technology coming into this sector, all of these changes. You've got an industry that's majority dominated in construction and the wider AEC. You've got tech, which is also in that same guise. And it's an opportunity, really, I think, for us to look at it slightly different in terms of how we involve people. And I think this inclusion piece, this diversity of thought, and how we bring people in is really, really important. There's no way we're going to cover all this subject. We've said it a few times. I think probably now is, of course, to say thank you to all of our panelists. Nima, I'm sure, will be sharing some resources. I'm sure each of the speakers has got some articles and documents that they can share with the audience as well, post to do a bit more work on this. So I'm going to wrap. Unfortunately, we're cut for time. I'm going to say thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for Nima for hosting a fantastic event, and for Procore for sponsoring this session. I hope you've enjoyed this, and if you'd like follow-up, please, I'm sure, tap everyone up on LinkedIn and get in touch if you'd like to get involved more. Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. Well done.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks all. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.